call tonight's Hamilton County Schools Facilities Committee meeting to order at this time. It's good to see everybody. Hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving or holiday break. I will say this in the beginning before we get started. I will have to step away after we discuss the District 5 school concern, as I double booked myself and I am supposed to be in Atlanta, Georgia before 8 o'clock in the morning for a conference. So I'm going to have to leave to travel. So I will be stepping away. However, my colleague in the work, and she was also part of the facilities working group, Mrs. Tiffany Robinson, is going to take over for me at that time, and the meeting will continue on. Okay? So please forgive me for having to step away, but duty calls. So we'll go ahead and get started. And the first topic of conversation, of course, is the Reinvest in the Brainerd community, which is, of course, in District 5. I don't know, last time I yielded to the board member to share what was at that meeting, but I am that person. So I do want to say, before we get into this, and I didn't acknowledge this the last time, but several of our board members, when they could, were able to, were pretty much at all of the meetings. And so I do want to thank each and every person who was able to do that if their schedules permitted. And if you do have feedback in any of the presentations going forward, like we did last time, please feel free to chime in at any time. So with that being said, we met at Brainerd High School to discuss the Brainerd Reinvest in Brainerd community recommendation in the facilities plan, which encompasses or deals with both Brainerd and Dalewood school communities. That was held on October the 17th, and what we knew, talking about the community history of the feeder pattern there with Dalewood and Brainerd. It talked about, the high school student body into the same building. Many concerns were expressed about what that looked like. I know at one particular table, I spent a lot of time explaining to them that concept would be no different from a CSLA or a CSAS or East Hamilton Middle High when they both were in the same building, or Signal Mountain Middle High, or even what the upcoming Tyner Middle High Academy would look like. And I think that kind of cleared some concerns there, but there were a lot of concerns about that. A lot of concerns about losing the community identity, like I said, of the whole Woodmore, Dalewood, Brainerd feeder pattern. And a lot of that I think a lot of that was coming from the name, like if Dalewood went to Brainerd, what would that look like? What would the name be? So forth and so on. As Dalewood is a neighborhood in that community, not just a school name there, and what did that look like there? Also, there were concerns about what would happen or what would take place at the Dalewood campus if the school was relocated to the Brainerd campus. And there were a lot of suggestions for that, from anything from a senior center to more voc or technical school training there. Adult high school training was there. Once again, it came up about ensuring that whatever is going on in those buildings did address more of a vocational and technical training and more non-college bound programs for those students, piquing interest in what the students would like to see there, as well as the community. And I have some quotes. So a big thing was, and since I've been on the board, I will say this, it's always been a discussion. I've gotten calls every year for now 9 years on. So they closing our school this year. They're gonna close Brainerd this year. I mean, that's always been an ongoing discussion. Where in the rumor mill that came from, I can understand sometimes where it does come from, but it's always a concern. And so when in talking about this, what we heard a lot was, if they're gonna do this, we want new. We don't want to redo. We don't want you to just come in and slap some paint somewhere, or come in and do this. But we really truly want to see. One lady literally said, "We want to see it look like the CSLA, or we want to see it look like." I can't even think of the other school that she mentioned, but CSLA was a big example of what they like to see the school. Harrison, or like, why can't we get a brand new building like Harrison, or why can't we get a brand new building like Tyner? But if we can't get a brand new building, we want to gut out, like we want it to be like the CSLA. That was a big concern there. They kept saying that there was a clear concern of the term reinvesting into the Brainerd community, and they were saying invest, not reinvest. That was a direct quote from someone. Also, there was concern about and talking about the investment of the Brainerd community. Why wasn't Barger being addressed at that time in the facilities plan? Felt like they needed more fine arts. If the school was gonna, whatever was gonna happen there needed to be more fine arts exposure, more ELL supports. There were a lot of alumni, parents, staff, and just general community members present that night. And they said another quote was to invest in us to make our high school campus 2030, like make it updated, like make it modern, like take it to the next level, not just bring it to that level. A lot of them opposed, like I said, consolidating with the older students, the middle school with the older students. Security measures were a concern there. Tech and academics needed to prepare students. Some were neutral on the decision. They wanted to hear more. They wanted to know what it was going to look like. They wanted to know why there weren't things for us to show them what it would look like. Some were excited about the thought of the school getting renovated because they felt like our children, I said this before, our kids go to other campuses and they see them and wonder why their school doesn't look like that. And so they were actually intrigued by what it could look like if it was going to be able to be renovated. Of course, I kept hearing they needed to see more data. They wanted, if we were going to do additions or renovations, they wanted us to build up or add additional wings. Athletic facilities needed to be built and or upgraded. And there was a quote that said Chattanooga was the second worst rated city in America, and they wondered why. So what was there? And then none of the group, they wanted to know why none of the group that was there that night was a part of the decision-making process, which was a big concern. And I heard that at another school, which I won't be here to share that, but I'll just say that was said at the Howard meeting too. They wanted to know why the people that were making the decisions, other than Superintendent Robertson, and because he was there, and the board members that were there were not part, like everybody else that was a part, why were they not at these meetings? Why are, where are they at? And they made the decision. So that was the main concerns there. I will say, and I did get asked a lot, like, what were my thoughts? And I've always been open to, and I told this to Superintendent Robinson, I'm open to exploring the idea if it looks right and if it's right for the community and it's right for the students and we do it right. But I'm also one that is going to speak on behalf of my community. And so if they came back and said, no, we don't want this, and y'all know I'm gonna sit here and say no, because I was represented to support them, and that would only be once I understood that it wouldn't be what I think it should be for the students. But I am open to explore it. I've seen it in several different places. And I always use this example, and I shared this example with Dr. Robertson. There's a school district in Huntsville, Alabama that really mirrors what used to be the Brainerd Dalewood pattern. It's in District 1 in Huntsville, in the Huntsville City Schools, and it used to be J.O. Johnson High School and Davis Hills Middle School, and they were both on state priority lists. They ended up being taken over by the state, and when they reopened the schools, they reopened them under brand new names, which probably meant they got a new school number. And I'm not saying do that. I'm just kind of setting the background here. We're not there because our schools didn't get taken over. But they reopened under brand new names, but they all went to the same campus. Not that particular campus, but another plot of land, probably 5 minutes either way from each school. And it's Jemison High School and McNair Middle School, and they sit on this same plot of land. And there's a big, this is off of, not Pulaski, Pulaski Pike, right off of Pulaski Pike. Yeah. But it's a campus, and it's the middle school. Like if I'm facing you all, this side is the middle school, this side is the high school, and it's a long corridor that like connects the two schools. But everything that you would need to be successful either in middle school or high school, academically, socially, and there needs to be made, are all on one big campus. And so I could see that being done. I mean, I don't know what it would look like. Once again, open to explore the opportunity, but it has to be right for the students of both Dalewood and Brainerd High School. If that was the case, it'd have to be right for the community that those schools sit in and have a long history of there, and we'd have to get it right. We would have to get it right for me to support it. But I am open to exploring it if it became a priority. But like Mr. Perez, I think said this last week, we have a lot of recommendations here and not sure how far that money's gonna stretch. So I don't know if it's not gonna stretch right and it's not gonna be done right. I'm not in support of it, but I am open to exploring it. Mr. Perez?
So I was going to basically add that statement. I'm looking at this from how big is too big and what are our priorities. And maybe there'll be a question in here for Dr. Robertson, but I walked away from that meeting wondering if there was an itch that nobody was asking to scratch, and whether that was a top priority. The group I was in was not opposed, but what I did also take away is there's a lot of pride in what's happening at Brainerd and some of the work there, and a lot of pride at what's happening at Dalewood and the work there. And so this concern that we're doing some amazing things. We would love our community to know the amazing things we're doing. And are we going to lose some of that if we bring it together? But I didn't really have a sense of opposition to it in the group that I was sitting with. I just had the sense of, is this the priority? The strong response in the open time for talking to us, whatever we call that, was, I would say, a lack of trust in us actually doing right by the community. And so I think a lot of historical mistrust based on what was being said. So whatever we do, I would say I didn't get a sense from the community that this is their top priority, so I'd love to understand why, what would make it a priority for us, and then secondly, we better follow through as a board on whatever we promise to do in that community, so that we can rebuild trust and rebuild really a facility that is top of the line. So the question for you, Dr. Robertson, is if you can clarify to me why this would be, top of the line or one of the top priorities there.
Yeah, so I think a couple things went into considering this as a priority. One of the biggest things is that we got two buildings that both need significant investment, right? In Brainerd and also in Dalewood. You have two schools that over the past several years have declined in enrollment from where they historically have been, which allows the opportunity to look at investing into one building that will be, top notch for two schools. One thing that Ms. Jones, and I'll say this before I forget about it, but it did come up in the community meeting that I thought actually was a really good idea that we had not considered, is that Barger is right down the road, and it is one of the buildings that needs the most attention. And there was a recommendation from a couple of people at the community meeting. It didn't quite make it into this feedback that suggested that when this takes place that you could reuse Dalewood as possibly more pre-K seats and move Barger to Dalewood, because Dalewood, even though it's not in great shape, is in much better shape than Barger. So I think that's something to consider. But I think, from a go back to the recommendations, you think about trying to get as many kids as possible into a great facility, providing the opportunities that kids need and deserve. We see this as an opportunity to get a number of kids from Dalewood and Brainerd into a renovated and added on campus with enhanced athletic facilities as a way to achieve that goal.
Mrs. Tiffany Robinson.
I just wanted to ask a question for point of clarification, since I was not at this community meeting. So is the primary feedback that they would rather the facilities be left alone as is, or and have nothing done to it, or was there some alternative that I'm just not picking up? I just want to make sure I'm clear.
So like Mr. Perez said, it was kind of, there really wasn't opposition to doing it. It was just, if it's gonna be done, and it pretty much is, if this is what y'all gonna decide to do, you better do it right. However, I don't think either one would say they're okay with the buildings that they're in. I mean, Dalewood is older. It has a newer addition to the left if you're standing in front of it. Brainerd, of course, is older, and both of them need tremendous work. And of course, neither one of them have everything that they need at their individual particular campuses, athletic-wise and academic-wise. Great programming going on in those buildings. Great programming, and both are hidden jewels. And middle school-wise, people can say what they want to say, but Dalewood is a hidden jewel. A hidden jewel. And if you live in that district and your kid doesn't go there, you're missing out on a lot, middle school-wise. And even at Brainerd, there are great things going on there. So both have great programming going on. The media doesn't always pick up on those because they tend to focus the other way. But there's great programming going on there. So they didn't say no. They just said, we've heard this before. Then we heard y'all it was all the like Ms. Perez said, it was kind of like all this, it was a great deal of mistrust with Hamilton County Schools, and just kind of feeling they had been left out of that. To answer your question? Yes.
Could I add on to it? I would say that there was a sentiment more than anything of just saying, if you're going to do this, do it the right way. And until we see you do it the right way, we're going to be skeptical.
Right.
There was not a huge sentiment of don't do this, or wasn't a huge sentiment of here's a better idea. It essentially was, if you're going to do it the right way.
Mrs. Faye Robinson?
Yes, well, I think, and looking at the numbers that I have as of October 2023, Brainerd High capacity is 69%, and Dalewood is just under 41. So on paper, it just makes sense to utilize it, but by the same token, what will the blueprint be like? I mean, what are the schools wanting so that they will have pride? And like, yes, our school is as good as the school across town. And I think that we would love to, I would love to see that, and the proposal and the programs, the curriculum that will be there. And I think it's great.
I think it's a good point to Ms. Jones's point earlier, is the programming is there. They've made it work. Think about the recording at Dalewood. They've made it work in a facility that really wasn't meant for it. So when we do an addition, we can make sure that the facility is there. They also, you can drive by the front of Brainerd and see that the front of it needs
You
some
see
work.
the rebar and the step.
Right. So.
Just be honest. Mrs. Thurman?
Yes, I think I hadn't thought about that either, moving Barger to Dalewood. I mean, that seems to be,
I think it's a great idea, and it's one that we had not thought of. There were
I hadn't thought
a
of that.
handful
There
of
was a
people at that
community
meeting
member
that
that said
mentioned it. I think after we did do this and kids moved from Dalewood, you could put not a whole lot of money. You have to put some money just to make some revisions, because we've already done some roof work there, and it would be a better setting, and it also opens up, like we've talked about in the past, opportunity for more pre-K seats. And then we've got a property on Brainerd Road that is a good asset for the district.
Well, at the current enrollment in Barker, it would only be, the Dalewood Middle School would only be 60% capacity.
Yep.
So you not only do you have room for growth, but you also have room for expansion if we wanted to go up to 800, say.
Yeah.
Like, separate, K1 and 2.
Yeah.
Ms. Black? Mrs. Black, I'm sorry.
That was going to be my question, is what do we have any idea of what the price tag would be to bring Dalewood to a place where, like, the kids from Barger could walk in and be proud of their school and, like, get it to where it needs to be? Like, do we have any idea what that price tag is?
I don't think, but I mean, again, you're not talking about massive renovations. I think you could, I'm not even going to try to throw a number on it, but I think it's less than what we're talking about with any of these other options.
I really do like this idea, because I've known for a long time that Barger was in need of some love. and it's at 104% capacity right now, and that's with portables out back. And having room to grow and getting them into a better facility, open up pre-K seats. I mean, I'm always going to be for early childhood education for sure. I think that seems like a really, really viable option. Do we have like numbers of how much the renovation at Brainerd would cost?
We've kind of thrown some rough numbers at it. I think that you're probably for this one and for Soddy-Daisy. When we get to talk about that, you're talking anywhere from $20 to $30 million for each of them.
Okay. All right. And that's athletic facilities and building. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Grown?
I've seen the work that Mr. Williams has done at Dalewood. I spent at least a couple hours there not too long ago, and that's with the work that's been done there under his leadership over the last few years. That place is pretty much ready to walk into on day one and be a good facility for these kids. So, makes great sense. It's just common sense. And then we can deal with maybe expansion at the old Barger, at Barger, and see what we can do there also. So, we have that property.
Mr. King?
So when you said 25, 30 million, so now
2030.
20 to 30, so now figure in the renovation for Dalewood also. How much is that?
Yeah,
to make
I
it-
mean, I wouldn't want to guess at what Dalewood is, because I honestly, there are things that, silly things you don't think of when you're going to an elementary. Are we going to have to put in,
Right.
smaller toilets in every
So-
bathroom?
So would Dalewood still fall in the 1 to 3 year plan?
No,
Or would
I
it
think
go
it
to
would,
the?
yeah, I think it would push out, because you're
All
gonna,
right, that's what I was wondering.
to get the Brainerd addition
Right.
and renovation ready for Dalewood to move over, that's probably 2 years down the road, and then you would
Right.
want at least a year to, minimum, if you just painted, at least a year to clean up and get ready for the move from
Right.
Barger to Dalewood.
And there's gonna have to be some work in the Dalewood school for Barger to take it over.
Sure.
so.
Yeah, there's some
But I think you also, think about just moving in furniture. One of the things that we traditionally we've rushed stuff and tried to last minute, and it just seems like our timing always gets like that. It would be nice to be able to order furniture, get it set up and ready for kids August, instead of scrambling at the end of July to get it ready. So.
Right. Barger is in I get emails a lot from Barger. There's a lot going on, from holes in the ceiling where it's leaking, and it's a lot going on there. So those children do deserve that. I do want to bring this up. I know that here recently there was discussion, and there's a press conference tomorrow about this. And Brainerd softball field was mentioned in the discussion that came up from the commission with that vote. And I know Brainerd needs a softball field. Trust me, I know. If there's not one, I don't want to call his name, but he knows there is a father of a softball kid at Brainerd. If Brainerd don't get a softball field, I'm probably never gonna hear the last of it. However, I always believe in doing things decently and in order. And so on last week, when I heard about the monies that was being allocated to both Howard and to Brainerd for turf at Howard and softball field at Brainerd, I do have concerns about putting a turf field at Howard and putting, no, let me go back, let me clear that up. The turf field is fine, just the timing of it. Also with the softball field, the timing of it, because if they're in this plan and we're trying to make decisions about a plan, I would hate to prematurely put turf down on a field and or set up a softball field on a piece of land that could, based off of whatever the drawings could be or renderings could be or whatever they may look like for Brainerd High School, or Dalewood, Brainerd Middle Academy, whatever it could be called, if it ever got, whatever, if it's decided there. If we need that land, and I say that because Rhonda and I just talked about this at Tyner. We had to, if you go look at the new Tyner, it's on the old football field. The new building is on the football field. So we had turfed the football field. Where would the new building have started? And that's a big concern for me. So to the commission, and so I know some of them are present today, and I know Deputy Mayor McClendon is here today. I do think that the timing for that needs to be considered, because if that's what you so choose to do with the money, children deserve to have softball fields to play in, adequate facilities so they can host games, and it's revenue for their schools. Turf fields, revenue for the school. Double stuff can go on there. Soccer, all that kind of stuff. I get that. I don't think that it's taking off my school board hat as a city taxpayer and a county taxpayer. I do not think it's good stewardship of my dollars. Because if you have to come back and build on something that we just created, or we have to rework something else because we could have just had a vacant field and we no longer have a vacant field, so we got to redo something else. It might cost a little bit more. I just think we need to think that through before that's done. So if that's the case and that's what happens there, I think that should be delayed in doing until we know what we decide to recommend as a board back to the commission that we want to do with the facilities plan. I just don't think it's good stewardship.
I agree, and I don't think we would do anything without making sure that, the field was going to be usable after the addition.
I'm sorry.
I just want to say that, I'm fairly confident that there's enough property at Howard where we could put an addition without touching the football field. The football field's in good condition. We've invested in it. It's got a track around it. It's got lights.
Right.
And there's plenty of vacant property or property that we could clear that we already own there that we could do an addition without touching the football field. And if we don't have to rebuild an entire football field, that's what I would prefer as a taxpayer.
Right.
Yeah.
You're talking about at Brainerd, right?
No, at Howard. She was just saying,
but I'm just saying period when you think about it. But no, I agree with that. Now, keep in mind, some of the backfield is pretty much cesspool.
Yeah.
So you ain't building on that. But it's like it leaks. Not leaks. It floods back in the back of Howard. So you only have that field to the right where Paul Soames used to be, or to the other side where the gym is and the parking lot. I'm speaking more to the Brainerd issue in there. Where I would think ideally you put a softball field, and even where the softball team and the coaches and the sponsors have talked about before, I could see that land being used for building purposes first before you put a field there. And so just thinking that through, just making sure you think that through.
well, we would have drawings before we would move forward.
I don't know, a lot of things happen around here.
No.
We don't know about it.
We don't know
No,
that.
I
This
mean,
ain't.
Before we would build something, are you saying
Yeah,
push
before we
pause
build-
until we have
Yeah,
rendering?
Before we would build something, you would have drawings, but
Yeah.
this board is going to have to approve projects,
For sure.
which then we would go get architects to do renderings.
But as far as the county commission money is concerned, we could push pause until we had renderings to
Absolutely.
know what we were doing. Okay,
Yeah.
with it. That was not one.
So, can I just clarify, and I don't know if you've got any other lights?
Yeah, I have Mr. King and Mr. Robinson. But
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. So I'm sorry, Ms. Robinson and Mrs. Faye Robinson. and
Okay.
Mr. King, go ahead.
Thank you. The present capacity at Brainerd High is 1,085, the building capacity. If we go forward with the new reinvesting, how many would we want to have the capacity for?
I think that's one of the reasons why we're looking at this, is because there's quite a bit of room there already. We definitely will want to add on, at minimum, a wing that's connected to the existing building, and we're gonna have to look at also a auxiliary gym, because you're adding, middle school, that you would need practice space for it. So I don't know the exact square footage, but one of the things that makes this a unique opportunity is because the building is already big enough that we could renovate the existing building, add on to it, and make sure it's a good facility. I use the example, and Ms. Jones mentioned it earlier, maybe Mr. Perez did, but, the CSLA building, how part of that building is a renovation and then part of it is a new construction, you know, something of that nature.
Because it seems to be plenty of space to build at Brainerd.
Yes, ma'am, it's one of our larger properties.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
That's all I have, Kyle, so you can go ahead.
So just clarify, so here's like, bring recommendation back for, not only looking at this, but then once Dalewood, is moved into the new portion of the building, possibility of Barger coming to Dalewood. Right?
Barger going anywhere but where them ceilings leaking
Stop.
and that this was on the wall.
The other thing that I'll put out there that doesn't have to be discussed now, but should be a topic of future conversations, the impact that this has on Orchard Knob Middle. Because when this happens, it would be a pure zone from 6 through 12 for Brainerd, which will leave about 130, 140 kids presently in that Orchard Knob zone. And so that will be something we'll want to talk about as we move forward.
So the impact to them would be,
Because right now, some of Orchard Knob Middle has a portion of the zone that
yeah, they zone
goes
to Brainerd for high school, right?
Right, and so what we would want to do here is make that a pure 6 through 12 zone, so that everybody 6 through 12 is going together, which if you pull that small portion out, it's gonna cut into Orchard Knob's already small enrollment.
So then, so it would decrease their enrollment.
Decrease,
the Orchard Knob.
decrease.
So what would it decrease that number to?
To about 130, 140.
And their current enrollment is,
It's like
I mean,
two,
what's the current enrollment?
somewhere around 300.
So we'll cut them in half. But so within that area,
So within that area is when we talked about this last week, this is where the conversation about Howard Connect can become part of the conversation. Is that location that we can do something with Howard Connect as like a zone magnet? Is it something that, you know, the board wants us to look at? We've got a number of seats already down there with CGLA, with Boys Prep, with Chat Charter, with the East Lake. You know, is it something that the board wants to look at doing something, you know, different to serve a really small zoned school?
so so what you're saying is, if we make the Dalewood Brainerd combo a complete 6 through 12 zone, then the children left at Archer Knob Middle will become similar to what Tyner Academy and Tyner Middle is now. Because I mean, that's essentially what happened over there. Their zone went down, and we added Magnet, right?
Yeah, what I'm saying is that the zone portion of Orchard Knob will be down to about 130 kids, which then makes you say, should we do something different with, you know, either that zone or with that building?
Howard Connect in there.
Yeah, because I would hate to. I don't want.
that's a discussion for later, but that makes, I don't think that's.
Saying it's definitely a discussion for later, but I'm making sure y'all recognize that as we move forward.
Yeah, why would we wait on that conversation?
Well, because I think that you,
Because
as
you got to talk about the impact to that
approve
community.
this, you then have probably 2 years before this actually goes into effect.
Yeah.
And so you've got a runway of
Yeah.
what do you decide to do? And there are options that, you know, we could talk about. It doesn't have to be what we've always done.
So leaving here tonight, you would take explore the recommendation we just presented, but also begin to prepare to provide options for what that
Yep.
will look. Yeah, 'cause I
At
don't
Orchard
wanna-
Knob.
Okay. 'Cause that's a great impact there for that school.
Yep.
Okay. All right, so. Next is, replacing Soddy-Daisy Middle School.
Yes.
And, I'm gonna let Ms. Thurman speak to this, but I do wanna say this before I leave. Well, I already said this. I think I already heard this when I got the call from the nurse
Go
to one
ahead.
of your schools. Very concerned about the traffic flow on that street. and what that would look like. A lot of accidents. I got a call one morning from a school nurse that lives in that area, and she was very concerned about the recommendation, the impact to traffic there, and what that would look like for them, and the length of time it already takes to get up and down that road, but what that would look like if the middle school was put there, and so forth and so on. So I did want to just say that because I won't be here for the whole conversation, but I heard her, so if she's listening to that, I heard you. I heard you loud and clear. And then we did receive some emails about that. But after talking to, receiving that, I have a sibling that lives in that area, and he talks to me a lot about the traffic that way as well. And then talking to Rhonda about some of the things there, and just reading about some of the traffic reports there. That is a concern for me. If we could figure that out where it's not going be a traffic, I don't even know the word for it. Yeah. Catastrophe nightmare. I'm willing to explore based off of whatever the desires are for that community, but I did just want to say that I did receive some communication to me from some residents in that area that were just concerned about what the impact of the traffic flow there would be.
Okay, the increased traffic, not just on the road, but on the hill. A lot of people don't realize Soddy-Daisy High School is on a hill. And then the softball field and baseball field are even up higher on another hill. So it's not just like the Soddy-Daisy High School is on a level piece of property and you're moving things around. There's lots of things to consider. But the increased traffic and safety were the primary concerns at this feedback overview, which is absolutely true. I just do not know, like I say, if there's emergencies there, it's always been a problem to get in and out of that school, of those schools, I should say. And I don't see adding another, say, maybe 400 students in there. And then, too, in a few years, we may have to add on to Daisy Elementary. And if we have to do that, that's even more traffic to put up there. And if you ever go to anything at that school, and I know, Joe, you've been to some things at the school, and I know, Larry, you have, and I'm sure that probably, Joe, you have. Joe Wingate's been to school up there. And if you go up there to any games, it's almost impossible to find somewhere to park now. And adding even more activity up there on that hill with the middle school, I just don't see that. But I kind of had to... a lot of people were very concerned about the choice of combining elementary, middle, and high on one campus. A lot of concerns about that. And then it said rebuilding the middle school at its current location is my pick. But I thought it was funny. It says there's clear interest in exploring different configurations such as a middle-high combination or keeping elementary schools up to grade 8. The only reason that was interest is because they wondered what in the world we were doing. It wasn't that somebody came out and said, hey, why don't we do that? It was like, you told us we were going to do it, so everybody was interested in why are you going to do that? So that's the interest that was there, seeing what we were talking about. So I still want, and it's still my wish, because not just of the traffic on Sequoia Road, and if anybody's has never been to Hyatt Road, Gino, will you take them a tour of Hyatt Road to show them why that's not an option as one of the major ways to get into Soddy-Daisy High School? I do not think that two school buses can pass each other on Hyatt Road. Am I wrong? They don't. The buses don't travel, and so that road is really a very windy, very steep road right there. And we're getting ready to put another subdivision up there on Hyatt Road, off of Hyatt Road, right? And I don't know how many houses there. 80 houses going in right there next to the high school. So there's all kinds of traffic issues there. My preference is, and most of the people that I talk to, their preference is building the middle school where the middle school is. It's, I think, about 35 acres there. I know some of it is a little bit low, and it does flood. Sometimes it's not considered a flood zone, but it does flood at times. I still like the idea that we had in the beginning to build the middle school where the football field is, and then tear the school down and put the football field where the school is, which is what I thought it was going to be up until I was surprised with the mayor's plan here. I was quite blindsided by that, and I thought, well, if I would give it a while and I would walk the grounds. I was back up there with Gino again, I guess Saturday morning, and we looked at another option. But I still think the best option is at the middle school, building it where it is. Have a nice campus there. Like I say, I have talked to people about getting donations of property so we can widen the entrance. We can widen it where we can stack cars in there to get them off of Dayton Pike. Soddy-Daisy, City of Soddy-Daisy has said they could even give us some property on one side of the road, about 12 feet on one side, and then the church give us some property on the other side, or work with us about getting some property on the other side by the church. And I still think that's the best option that we have there, because I know with all this, and I gave everyone this letter here from George Luttrell, a lot of the building going on there, and there's also another development going on. I think they wanted 750 houses, but maybe end up being about 500 more besides what we have here.
They can build 520 now, it could go to 700 more.
Okay. So that's even another one that's not even on this list that are going on as we speak. So that's a lot of building going on, and I do not want to be caught like we were over in East Brainerd, saying that, you know, we've underbuilt and we should have built what we needed when we needed it. And we can build a middle school with the thought of an addition in mind if we need it. We can add on to Daisy Elementary if needed, as long as we don't put a middle school up there. But if we put a middle school there and have to add on to Daisy Elementary, it's going to be even a worse nightmare, because all of those schools are right there by each other. And I just think it's a logistical nightmare myself. So I think that most of the people that I have spoken to, that's what they want to do. Also, there were some things brought up at this meeting that I had not thought of. I know Ryan Jenkins brought this up to my attention. He said, well, Rhonda, you know, if we put the middle school and high school here, it's going to make the kids at Loftus feel left out, because it's going to feel like all these people right here all together, and then they're going to be the outsiders coming into the high school. And we're already, that's where we're losing our kids at Soddy-Daisy, is at the middle school. The middle school's been in such bad shape for such a long time. So many kids have gone other places because the school has been in such bad shape. I mean, you're talking about roofs leaking, we're talking about snakes falling from the ceiling. So, Kritz is gone. So I say she ought to be glad just to have leaks and water coming through the ceiling, because sometimes we have snakes. But, so we need, and I mean, everybody in Soddy-Daisy knows it. So parents know it, and they didn't want their kids to go to school there. So I still think we need to, like I say, build a nice new campus where this is. I don't like the idea of giving up of the football field and the baseball field and having to share one with the high school. I don't care how much turf you put on it. There's only 24 hours in a day. You also have the band who has to practice. You have, now we're going to get lacrosse on board, because it's going to be a TSSAA sanctioned sport. Now we're going to provide that, and if we do that for the boys, guess what we have to do for the girls? We have to do something for the girls. So after a while, you just run out of space for all of these things. And so I just think building the school, a new middle school on the middle school property, the current middle school property, is the best way to go, and I'm just not going to give up on that. Because we can squeeze a school up there. I'm not saying we can't. Sure we can, but does it make sense? I don't think it makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Perez.
So mine's simple from this, which was, again, I'm looking, because we're going to have to prioritize. And I did want to just state that I walked away feeling that Soddy-Daisy Middle School is a priority. From everybody in the community saying this is not an acceptable building the way it is. So in my list of when we have to prioritize, it's going to be there. I have been to activities for the band and agree that some of those roads are shocking to think that kids are driving up these roads sometimes. And when I was concerned about driving up some of those roads, must be high.
Yeah.
But and to realize, so I think there's a lot that has to be looked at that way. In general, not really with Soddy-Daisy. The comment that stood out to me was that about if we do a middle school and high school, there will be students who come in later in the high school and they will be outsiders to that high school for their whole, and that, I thought that was a really interesting comment, really good concern to have in mind. But I also, this is very general with Dalewood and Brainerd, and for being on Signal, I've also found the value of the connection, at least, between middle school and high school, because of the continuity for both athletics and for some of the other activities where that continuity allows for really building a strong program. And I think one of the speakers mentioned his concern that was a loss. I'm not saying that that's the answer, because I think, to me, the concern of the students who feel left out is a bigger concern. Like, that's actually something that I'd hate for those kids to miss out on athletics or miss out on extracurriculars because they came in later than everybody else. But again, Soddy-Daisy, to me, at middle school, from what I gathered, is not acceptable under its current conditions, and that's something that we have to prioritize as a board.
And also, can I say one other thing? Also, not just that the kids at Loftus will maybe feel a little like an outsider. The kids at Soddy Elementary and Allen Elementary are going to feel a little bit, maybe they're not old enough to quite feel that yet, but maybe the fifth grade they are. But they're going to be coming onto a campus that seemed to have been somebody else's campus. So you have two other elementary schools that feed into the middle school, and then the high school, Soddy Elementary and Allen Elementary as well. So, you know, I mean, trying to keep it a continuity, I can see that, but you have other factors in there as well. Plus, all these other new people that are coming, most of them are zoned for Daisy Elementary. So we're going to have to build on to Daisy Elementary before too much longer, and it just puts too much traffic up there.
Mr. Connor?
Thank you. So I have a question, Dr. Robertson, that'll follow up from that. So I was talking to a teacher at Soddy-Daisy High School and talking about some concerns on here also with the bell times impacted. Would we have different start times for the different schools? Okay, so we would.
I don't know what that would look like, but this would, you know, all of these would certainly impact bell times.
And so thinking on that, we would therefore have different buses. So a kindergartner wouldn't be riding a bus with a ninth grader.
Absolutely.
Okay,
You would have,
not.
the 6
Okay.
through 12 would have the same bell schedule, which we do at numerous other schools, but Daisy would be on a different, so it may be a 8 o'clock start time for the 6 through 12 and an 8:40 for Daisy, or 7:45 and an 8, I don't know what it would be, but
Right.
those start times would be different.
Okay, because the person I was talking to, which is speculation, was why would we be sending a bus to the same house? So, you know, I have 4 children. They are going to be from high school all the way down to elementary school at one point. So,
Same way we do, I mean, we do that now consistently across the county.
but usually not to the same site.
No, we
Not-
do.
I mean, not.
Nolan's an example. No one's
Okay.
on the same campus as the middle high school at Signal Mountain, and it's a different start time than 6 through 12.
Okay. Again, just going back to making sure that we are separating as best we can. And I was worried, and they were worried also that, and forgive me, I've got a little bit of voice loss here, but they were worried that they had seen situations in other places trying to save money when they're trying to get to the same spot. So
Yeah.
just wanted to make sure that's on the record that we will not be doing that.
Mrs. Robinson?
If the new middle school is built at Soddy-Daisy, would the high school remain and the elementary remain the same?
If you're saying if there was a proposal to build on the old middle school site,
Yes, a new one.
yes, but again, like, looking at these and, looking at these separate from the entire proposal is hard to do. And what I mean by that is that, you know, it's the same way when we had this conversation last week about Clifton Hills. For us to build a new Clifton Hills means it's either going to be pushed a few years or something else is going to get left out, right? And so by doing that, you know, if we're talking about $20 to $30 million to renovate and do all the things that we need to do to get it ready, you're talking about, you know, a middle school is going to be 20 to 25 million more than what we're expecting to spend here. So the financial impact is a bigger consideration than anything.
Can I have to say something? Jeff, why is it we have been on this list for a new middle school for all these years? Why now are we the ones that get caught in the financial crunch that Soddy-Daisy has to sacrifice so that why are we the ones? Because CSLA, like I said, they got a brand new high school that we did not need. They did not help overcrowding, did not help anything because magnet schools do not help with overcrowding. They get a new school with an additional high school. Tyner gets a really nice school, and I'm glad for Tyner getting a really nice school. And now all of a sudden it comes Soddy-Daisy Middle School, and we have to look at building on to the high school so we can save money, or we're going to be shoved somewhere else. That's not acceptable at all.
So if you remember CSLA, and I would say CSLA, if there are hundreds of parents who used to come to the meetings, were here.
I don't care how many hundred. A lot of parents would come here from Soddy-Daisy if it wasn't so blame far.
You're right. I'm just using that as a point of
You
saying.
go to Soddy-Daisy, I'll get you a crowd.
I know you will. I'm just
God.
using it as a point of saying that if you remember back then, there was a proposal to build a new CSLA on their existing site. And I remember back then Dr. McDade saying it was going to be, I think back then he said it was 70 million, something like that. And we decided not to build it there. And so my point is that, like, if we're talking about CSLA, there are a lot of people that would say CSLA did not get what they wanted, that they actually got less than what they were originally promised in 1999. And those aren't my words. I'm just saying that here. What I would say about this, and I think I've been pretty consistent in messaging this to this board all the way back to when I interviewed for this job 2 years ago, is saying that, like, what we've done, the status quo of what we've done as a district is why we are where we are right now with facilities. We've not been willing to make some really hard decisions. And that's why we're operating 73 campuses for roughly 44,000 kids. And so we've got to make some hard decisions. If we just had a plethora of money that was just flowing in and flowing in.
Well, if we go back to neighborhood schools, Justin, if we hadn't started, I tell you, where a lot of the
I would
problems, we
say
can't do anything
neighborhoods-
about it now, because the reason we're in this shape is because we made some bad decisions early on. One time we had 15 magnet schools. You can't have schools that are not neighborhood schools and expect not to have a lot of schools, because you're getting a few from this area, a few from this area, and a few from this area, instead of taking care of each individual areas. This is how we got into this mess. I've witnessed it. I've been here for 20 years. I've seen what happened. But for Soddy-Daisy, we are a community school, and our community is growing. We are going to be the next East Brainerd. It's what's happening up in Soddy-Daisy, because we have the sewer in up there, and a lot of people are starting to build up there, and it's the only place left to build in Hamilton County, basically. Ooltewah's maxed out, East Brainerd's maxed out, downtown's maxed out, and it has to go towards Soddy-Daisy. This is a decision. This is a 50, 60-year decision, and we cannot mess this up.
I agree with you.
And I said, putting another school up there on that hill, I think is going to be a major mistake. And I just don't want to make a major mistake. We don't have to have Taj Mahal at Soddy-Daisy Middle. Just build us a decent school that the kids can go and be nice and get that parking lot and that school grounds so it doesn't look like an abandoned building. We've done some work up there and it looks a lot better than it did. But those kids deserve that. The community deserves that. People up there have been paying taxes for hundreds of years. They deserve that school. And I don't like the fact that when it comes to Soddy-Daisy Middle, all of a sudden, we're worried about the money when some schools have gone over $20 million. So I just don't understand why that has to be a consideration. If we're going to have priorities, let's have priorities. And like Marco said, I think that that's one of the priorities that we have is Soddy-Daisy Middle School, and why we can't just get the school we need. And like I say, we don't need a Taj Mahal. We're not that kind of people up there. But we do need a nice school with nice facilities. And the city of Soddy-Daisy is willing to, you know, like I say, give part of the road and do everything they can to help out. So, like I say, I just don't appreciate the fact that when it comes to Soddy-Daisy Middle, well, we only have so much money, so you're only getting this much, and this is what you're going to have to settle for. I just don't like that.
Yeah, and if it came across that way, what I'm saying is there are considerations that create really difficult decisions for this board to make, and that there are limited resources. I don't think it shortchanges what we can do at the high school campus for a 6 through 12 school. In fact, I think it enhances a lot of opportunities for kids that would be on that campus. I think we could be really intentional also about Loftus students that were coming over in ninth grade. We have that scenario at a number of different schools where kids from multiple campuses are coming on to a new campus in ninth grade and can be really intentional there. I think growth is something the board's got to consider. I think, you know, when you look across the northern end of the county, there are some concerns about elementary growth in terms of the elementary schools and their capacity. I would say where you have less concern, though, is at 6 through 12. And in 6 through 12, between Soddy-Daisy, Sequoia, and Sell Creek, and even if you wanted to talk about Hickson in the north end of the county, we've got room in 6 through 12, but Ms. Sermon is right. The place we would have a little bit of a risk is at the elementary schools.
So, Rhonda, I've got a question for you. So, do you think that what is best is for it to become a 6 through 12 at that current property, or to just do a new middle school and build a new high school somewhere else? Like
No,
what-
not new high school, just a new middle school. Just build a
Okay.
middle school where it is. The high school's fine.
Okay.
Don't, with the elementary school, it needs some updating. It needs a gym at the elementary school. High school's here, elementary school's down here, and they're wanting to put the middle school over here.
Okay.
But I say just leave it. We have the property already. There's like 35 acres there, and we would just be abandoning that property.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I understood what you're advocating for. I did notice that in the alternatives, explore the feasibility of using the old Soddy-Daisy High School property. Have we done that yet? Have we explored that yet?
Not to discount any ideas, but that idea is not a
not
good
fun.
idea.
Okay, all right.
You've got, it's not a big piece of property. That's the property that, I don't know, 6 months or so ago, we made an agreement with town of Soddy-Daisy to give them a portion, and we're working with them on repaving. So that one's not a good
There's
idea.
just not that much room there, and it doesn't make
Okay.
any more sense to use that property than the middle school property.
Right.
The middle school property is a whole lot better than this property.
Yeah,
And
I
then-
mean, I think the big discussion here, and again, you know, considering everything that Ms. Sermon said, the big discussion is like, what is the best, smartest use of the resources that we have? Right now, you've got a high school that's not fully being utilized in terms of capacity. You probably, if you wanted to, without putting a penny into it, you could probably move the kids over right now and make it work. That's not what we're saying, though. How do we add on to and enhance? And some of the things that have been mentioned are legitimate concerns. The traffic pattern is a legitimate concern. Avoiding Hyatt Road, we do own property that circles back around, that you could put an alternative exit onto Sequoia Road. And so there are some things that, as we do this, you would want to enhance on that property. The traffic patterns, the parking is something that didn't quite make it into these comments, but I heard that night a lot, is that parking on big football nights, or you know, if you had a PTA meeting at the elementary and a ball game at the high school, that could become an issue. So we would certainly want to look there. We would definitely want to put some kind of auxiliary gym down by the elementary to serve two purposes. One, that the elementary doesn't have a gym facility, and it adds practice space for the middle high school. So there are things that we would need to do. I think that the question is, like, right now, in terms of opportunities for kids that are in Soddy-Daisy, what's the best use? Is it to, you know, look at a 6-12, expanding options for athletics and other things and enhancing that property? Or, you know, is it possibly wait to see if more money's coming and then do as Ms. Sermon said?
And who on your team is looking at growth in that area right now?
Yeah, so Ben
saying that?
Coulter is
Okay.
the one that really, is Ben here?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ben's the one that really tracks it, and you know what, there is if sewer comes to the north end of the county, like, that's legitimate concern, and you know, I'm not gonna say Ms. Sermon misquoted me, but she did misquote me early on. What I did say to her is, I was like, you're right, that is a legitimate concern, and that's why we wouldn't sell property. Like, the middle school property would not be one that we recommended selling. I think there's a ton of community use for it now, but in the event that sewer does go in and there's a boom in property, we've got property there
Sewer's
that's
already there.
available. Sewer's there?
Yeah, where's Gino? Tell Gino to come. Okay. Yeah, sewer is there.
Not all the way through, like,
No, it's not all, you're
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about Cell Creek.
Yeah, I'm talking about like,
There's that past Soddy
Yeah.
Lake, it's not
Yeah.
far past Soddy Lake, just getting there.
Mr. Smith?
When the mayor's plan came out, this made the least sense to me than anything that was recommended. And Ms. Thurman has served on this board for 20 years. And I don't think anybody, certainly not anybody in Soddy-Daisy, understands that community from an educational standpoint than Rhonda Thurman. And I've been serving for 6 years now, and we've been talking about building a new Soddy-Daisy Middle School since I got here. And going up to Soddy-Daisy High School on Friday nights for 25 years doing high school football games, and it's awful. It's awful.
gotta get one of those special parking spots.
Well, we did, but it was still awful. And it just doesn't make any sense to me. And I've had a lot of calls, and it's not my district, but I've had a lot of calls from people up there that they want a new middle school. I was at the meeting that night, and what I walked away with, the majority of the folks that attended that meeting that night want a new middle school on the middle school property. Just didn't get the sense that they wanted to go up on the hill and add. I didn't get that sense at all. We get, when I say we, my high school gets a lot of Loftus kids, and we Loftus gets a lot of kids that should go to Soddy Middle, but they don't want to go there because of the shape that the building's in. So this one makes no. I think it's an easy fix. Now I understand it's more money. I get that. I can remember back in the '70s when I was growing up. If you were going to move somewhere in Chattanooga, you wanted to either live in Red Bank or East Ridge. You remember that?
Oh, yeah, I live in Red Bank.
Yeah, you did. That's where you wanted to live.
I was born in Soddy-Daisy.
Well, now all the talk is
Of Soddy-Daisy.
you want to live in Soddy-Daisy or even up further in Sell Creek. That's where you want to live. And so that's where all the growth is going to take place. And, this is complicated, and I've heard it said many times, we've got to make some tough decisions. To me, this is not a tough decision. It's an easy decision. You build the middle school where it's at now, on that property where it's at now. You're going to have a new elementary school up there before long.
You can add on to Daisy, though. There's plenty of room to add on to Daisy. I mean, there's no sense.
So I don't get this idea at all about going up on that hill and trying to do a 6 or 12 up there. That makes no sense to me.
Mr. Groen?
I really appreciate Mr. Luttrell having given us this document about growth in August in Soddy-Daisy. Would Ben happen to have one for the entire county?
I think you've got that, don't you? Pulled permits and.
In other words, all the current
Yeah.
and future permits for the entire county from all the cities and the county.
We can pull that directly from our.
Okay, so, our community is suffering the same growth pangs as, say, the state of Texas, for example. And a lot of this has started because of how our state is run, and a lot of it is based upon Volkswagen. So, as soon as Volkswagen announced they were moving here, Hamilton County was already in a housing crisis. And then we had 24,000 new jobs pop up in 8 years. And now people are moving here for economic, ideological reasons. We need to get this. I feel that this board is going to need to get a priority list together. I know we're meeting with you, Dr. Robertson, and the mayor this week, many of us. most of us, maybe. And we need to get a handle on exactly how many dollars are we talking about? And is the county commission really going to be on board with the funds that's going to be necessary? I mean, just if we did a new Clifton Hills, a new Soddy-Daisy Middle, a new elementary school in Red Bank, and the expansion of Hickson to accommodate DuPont, and of course we would accommodate Rivermont with that. You're talking 100 million right there.
Yep.
And probably 120 at least. That's a minimum.
Take that Hickson one out. That one's not on there, but you're right. It's that, and I think that's what the whole thing is like what I've talked about. The board's got a hard decision. Is, you know, we've got to bring some recommendations, but even bring the recommendations out, y'all are going to have to prioritize some of those because, to your point, more than likely something is not going.
And we still haven't mentioned Howard. So
Keep going.
to me, it makes sense that Gateway be developed, 185,000 square feet. What would it cost? $2.5 million? Maybe? Who knows? I can't throw out a number until we look at it. What's the estimated cost for the Cigna
Gateway?
building, for the intermediate elementary?
Yeah, Cigna building's probably 10 to 14, somewhere around there. That Gateway building's going to be 50 plus. That's going to be the biggest project on here.
Gateway. So the point is look, except for this young lady sitting next to me and maybe a couple of others on this board, I'm against raising taxes, but we've got a real issue that we have to face here. And if we're going to meet the needs of the community and Ben, how much it's going to be growing based upon, all the building permits that have been pulled just this year, I'd look everywhere and buildings are going up. I mean, Harrison, we're 200 away from their maximum. Allen Elementary, we're maybe 140 away from their maximum. And we've got all this construction taking place in Snow Hill, so this board is being faced with not misfeasance for the last 2 decades, in my opinion, not malfeasance, just misfeasance. And I applaud you for continuing this work. Started with the facilities report and really picking up the banner for this and leading our district to what is going to be and I agree, this is, like Rhonda said, this is a 40 or 50 year decision that this board and the next one is going to have to make. And we're going to have to use all of our persuasive powers to get with our corresponding county commissioners and come to grips with this. Because sooner or later we have to deal with the ideal environment that we've created. And this is the result of it. We've created this, and it's a good thing. Now we have to make it a good thing that's going to be better for the future. So, Ben, I'd like to get with you. I'll get with you, and I don't need to reinvent the wheel if you've already got this data, but I'd really like to take a look at it.
Thank you, Mr. Groen. I don't have any other,
I've been pushing my light. Is it not coming on?
no.
Okay, great.
Your light shines all the
Thanks.
Nope, no light.
Hello. I would like to talk.
Wait a minute, I have to give you permission.
Okay, sorry.
Mrs. Black, would you like to?
Thanks for that. I agree that I hear Mrs. Thurman for sure. I don't want to create a problem in Soddy-Daisy that the South Side is currently living with. And to give you a little bit of perspective, elementary schools on the South Side, Clifton Hills is at 143% capacity, East Side Elementary is at 87% capacity, and East Lake Elementary is at 119% capacity. And those all feed into, after middle school, Howard High School that's at 185% capacity. So obviously decisions in the past we can't go back and do again. We have to move forward. We have to come up with a plan that meets the needs of the communities that we serve. But I also, with the projected growth of Soddy-Daisy, don't want to participate in another one of those bad decisions that creates a problem that Soddy-Daisy is going to have to deal with in 15 years. If we're looking at, you know, the elementary schools in Soddy, you know, Allen's at 73%, Daisy's at 83%, and Soddy's at 88%. And so that's a decent place to be, to allow a little time to grow without taking up land to put the middle school on the high school property. I will admit that it was dark when I went to the community meeting out there, but I have no idea where we would put a middle school for that community on that campus. I really don't.
Remember, it's not it's a wing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not
It's kind of like like size of Howard Connect.
right.
Yeah. And is that going to be sufficient to serve the community moving forward? That's just the question I have. You know, I want to make sure that, you know, we go back and prioritize the communities that are already experiencing overcrowding, but also not participate in those decisions that are a bad decision that's gonna come back to bite us in 10 or 15 years. So.
Thank you. Mr. Keene.
All right. I know this is killing Joe down there. So I will say this, we were given the task to look at what buildings we need to close. That was a main goal of this MGT, but it's also about looking, you know, where to improve the growth in that. When we look, and I'll talk about District 9 for a minute, we're gonna be in years 3 or 4 facing the same situation that Brainerd, Dalewood are facing. Central's dropped a couple hundred students in the last couple years. Brown has dropped 250 in the last couple years. They both could easily fit within one campus. Soddy is not, as I look at this, Soddy is not in that situation. They're sitting at about
Soddy-Daisy.
Soddy-Daisy.
Thank you.
They're sitting at about almost 80% for both schools, 76, 78, where, you know, when we're talking about combining campuses into 612s, you know, the numbers are drastically lower. But as I look at this, right now we've talked, so reviewing, we've got chances to renovate a lot of schools and in the process close schools. There's been two times we've talked about building new schools. An opportunity in Red Bank, in which 2 schools would be closed, and then here in Soddy-Daisy, in which no schools would be closed, but we would not be closing Clifton Hills for Soddy-Daisy. So.
No, you said we've talked about 2 new schools. We actually talked about 3.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And so again, I think, you know, Soddy-Daisy is in that situation where their numbers don't warrant a 612 campus. But we've still got to keep in mind, you know, we're trying to lessen the footage of our, what do they say, our rooftops is the saying you've been talking about, and getting rid of some of the ACs and heatings and all the things that are costing so much, and we've got to also consider that. But I will say this, of the 612s that we've been talking about, Soddy's not one that would fit in. Soddy-Daisy is not one that would fit into that particular structure, I don't think.
Okay, I don't have any more lights on. Is there anybody who's like trying to talk and maybe it's not showing up? Okay. I did just want to add one more comment before we move on to Howard. You know, probably 5 years ago, maybe actually probably 6 years ago now, actually might be 7 years ago. I think it was in my first year of being on the board. We had a planning session at the Creative Discovery Museum, so some of you will remember this. And we talked a lot. I actually don't remember you being there, but you may have been. You would have been like probably COO at the time.
You would have been like 12.
And you would have been 12 years old, yes.
Older than the superintendent at the time.
Yeah, exactly. We talked a lot about planning, like space planning and facility planning, because that's how long this board has been talking about this since I've been here. And something that came up in that meeting that I just want to really like remind everyone of that's really, really important is that we can pull all the building permits in the world, but it doesn't always tell us the whole story about growth. And so I just really want to make sure that like you guys are thinking that way, and whoever's putting together the strategy behind the scenes around this is not just thinking about like permits being pulled, but we also need to be looking at existing rooftops, but then also we really need to look at student headcount. Even whenever we looked at the census data last year, whenever the commission was thinking about changing the lines for districts, what we noticed is that District 4, which was my entire district, or which also encompassed District 11 at the time, had the highest number of student count, yet the lowest, like I think, or not lowest, but it had like a substantially lower number of households and permits pulled, and that's because not only was it an urban area, but also because there's a lot of students and families living under one household. And so I just think we need to be really mindful of that and not forget that in our planning. So I just want to like put that out there.
Yep.
So, okay.
Thanks.
All right, we will move on to talking about the growth in the
So
house.
can I clarify
Yes,
before
absolutely.
we move on? So I'm hearing kind of a little bit of divide here. So bring back two things for the board to consider. One that's here, and then another one that puts a dollar figure on either a renovation or a replacement of Soddy-Daisy Middle.
Yeah, I
Is
think
that
we
kinda
had,
what
didn't
I'm
we had a formula at one time, if it was gonna cost over half of what it would cost to build a new school, you build a new school, because it doesn't make sense to build one. And I think that when we met up at the middle school, we surpassed that 50% mark, that it was gonna cost so much more to renovate Soddy-Daisy Middle School. I still think it needs to be on that campus. That is not my preference to do that, but it's gonna have to be a complete and total renovation if we did one where the school sits now. I'm just trying to keep down any disruption of schools, because there's nowhere for the kids to go if we're working on a building with them in it. There's nowhere to put the kids at Soddy-Daisy Middle School if you're working on that building and students in it. There's just nowhere to put them.
Complicated. I am also curious, if we rebuild on that property, what does that mean for seat numbers? Does that just replace the current number of seats, or does it actually is there actually expansion opportunity?
I
To
mean,
create more seats?
I think if you're building a new building, you would be foolish not to put a number of more seats. I mean,
Can you though on that piece
Oh,
of,
yeah.
based on the size of
Yeah.
property? Okay,
Yeah.
okay, great, that's
you're
great.
gonna run into, and to be clear though, on that property, you're gonna run into some of the same complaints about traffic though. Like we've gotta do some work with whoever the church is or the city, because it's a similar situation there as it is at Soddy High, as it is at Signal Mountain, that
Well-
the in and out is just not good.
But they could actually do that now. We've started to do that 2 or 3 times. I mean, that's the reason I know that we can get that property. We've already checked on it. Because we could stack the cars in off the road, but right now there's one road in and one road out.
Yeah.
If you have 2 in and 2 out, it takes care of a whole lot of the problem.
Any additional, Mrs. Robinson?
Yeah, real quick, would the Tennessee Department of Transportation help us out with maybe a turning lane or something like that at the schools, particularly with narrow roads?
You help me here, but on the middle school property, it would be hard to expand that. I can't remember what road is
Well,
that
there's,
turns into.
it's right across from the post office up in Soddy-Daisy.
There's no way to widen that road.
I've talked to Gino about that. I think he's probably gone. See, that's actually in the city of Soddy-Daisy, so that would be something to ask them. I don't know why you couldn't, but, we could check on that. I think there is somewhat of a turn lane there. They have made a quasi turn lane.
I mean, I think either way, if you're gonna do it, you do it right and you make a second
It just-
entrance exit.
Yeah.
Because it seems like that is such a major problem with the location of that many schools
Well,
at one place.
if you did it right, say on the inside, to get the cars in off the road, because the thing is, when they get in there, it just bottlenecks. There's one road in and one road out, and it just bottlenecks there because the buses and the car riders are all in the same lanes picking up kids, which is a very dangerous situation in and of itself. The whole thing is ridiculous. The buses need to either drive around the back and go out the back entrance. They need to redo the whole thing. It can be done, though.
It sounds like it. Thank you.
Mr. Connor?
We may not, again, sorry for the voice. We may not own this, but do we own the area behind that touches Card Road?
Yes, we do, and there's an entrance back there, despite what a lot of people have told me, there is an entrance, we used it for years. It does flood back there some, but that road can be built up, and yes, you can enter the middle school, that's why I said the buses could use the back way. There's lots of different things we can do there, yes, there is.
Thank you for the clarification. Yeah, I can't see it on this map, but it looks close, and I can see how it floods.
There is an entrance there, we used it for years.
I guess that's the road.
Mr. Smith?
I was going to mention that same thing. I remember when you used that. What they do now, because I pick kids up there every day, and there's kind of a pullover lane off of Dayton Boulevard there, but that gets full, and then so they're backed up all the way down the highway there. But I was going to bring up what Ben brought up, because I do remember when they used that back entrance, and it does flood, but it's a flash flood, so that could be repaired.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and move on to the Howard community, or growth of the Howard community. Mrs. Black, do you want to kick this off?
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks everybody for coming tonight, and for those who showed up at the community meeting for Howard. Just as I stated previously, the Howard School is at 185% capacity, and there's a need to create space for the high school, the high school students at Howard. The most logical thing to do would be to relocate Howard Connect. There's a strong sentiment in the community that they would prefer to relocate Howard Connect to the Gateway building, and not combine with Orchard Knob Middle School. Just culturally speaking, the community doesn't feel like part of their community. But the kids who go to battle from West Side and are close to the Gateway building do feed into the Howard now. A lot of other things that I heard at the community meeting, there was a lot of kind of the same stuff that happened at Brainerd, as far as frustration about not being included in the beginning of this process, and also mistrust of central office of Hamilton County Schools to not follow up on the best interest of the students or what we say that we're going to do. And again, I think, every student who comes to school in Hamilton County deserves to feel like that we are providing the best that we can for them. I agree that I don't want kids going to other campuses for sports events and feeling like we don't care about them because they go to better facilities somewhere else. Having said that, the needs I take away from this discussion beyond overcrowding is needs to repair and replace some HVAC units. At the community meeting, one of the teachers was talking about how it can get 85, 90, 95 degrees in her classroom. She's passed out before. And then I got text messages this morning that part of Howard was freezing. I'm gonna just assume that it's the same wing where like the air conditioning doesn't work, that the heat isn't working now. But and also just the need for an auxiliary gym. And I know this particular subject is contentious because a lot of the community is split. A lot of folks would like to see us build a brand new auxiliary gym so that the kids that go to Howard have the best that we can provide for them. And there's a lot of feelings around the old gym as far as it being historical. There's a lot of emotional attachment from the community. I did walk the campus and walk through the old gym, both levels, last Tuesday, right before Thanksgiving break. And it did take on water during that raining. The basement or the lower level of the gym was wet and had water coming into it. It does flood. There's a lot of asbestos. I would like to find a solution that respects and honors the history of Howard and the learning that's gone on there and the athletics that have gone on there, while also providing the best that we can possibly provide for the students at Howard. That was what I took away from it, is finding somewhere else for Howard Connect to move that is in line with community values, and so that Howard can take over that space that accommodates 400-something students, and spread out, upgrading athletic facilities, including having a new auxiliary gym, and addressing the needs around HVAC units. That's the priorities that I heard.
Thank you. Do you want to speak to any of that, or should we?
No, I mean, HVAC is a reminder of these are long-term decisions, and when we make mistakes about decisions, there are prices that are paid 20 years down the road. Renovation of that existing building, while we put a new chiller on, didn't replace any of the pipes, didn't replace any of the infrastructure, and so you've got a system there that it's like you're watering an old house. When you turn the water on, it's going to be cold for a long time before it gets hot. Same thing with the heat and air there. You've got a choice to make. A couple weeks ago when we heard that, it was when, if you remember, the first cold snaps were happening, and so the morning it was cold, and so the heater would start to heat up the water to, get the temperature up. Well, then when you flip the air on, that water's got to get cold again, and it takes a while. And so, we're dealing with things there. That HVAC, you're right, it needs to be replaced. There's not an easy solution because none of the original pipes were replaced. You've got a new unit that's using old infrastructure, and so that's an issue. I think that you've got a solution sitting right in front of us that we're having a hard time talking honestly about, and I know it's hard. Howard Connect, is on that campus. It does not have a zone, and so like we're talking about community schools, and just to be frank, when a school doesn't have a zone, we can't say it's a community school and doesn't have a zone. And so we've got declining enrollment there, about 190 kids on a place that would immediately resolve the long-term issues with overcrowding at Howard. I mentioned earlier in the evening, talking about Orchard Knob Middle, that if we move through with this Brainerd situation, that you've got a building there that's going to be way underutilized, and so there's a solution there for Howard Connect. I do think the Gateway building comes into it. One of the things that we talked about in the plan is opening up seats. So we talk about not having a lot of middle school seats in downtown, but we actually have quite a few. You've got Eastlake, you've got the charter schools, you've got Orchard Knob, and then if we move forward with the Gateway building, we would be expanding 6th grade seats in that capacity as well. So I think the question in front is like, what is the right thing to do? What is the best thing to do with Howard Connect and also serve Howard's overcrowding issue at the same time?
Mr. Perez?
So, I just want to point out that, because I heard this in that meeting and I want to acknowledge it. that there was a feeling that although we had heard from the community of Howard here presently that they were overlooked in the report. I know that wasn't the intention, but that was the perception. And so, if I understand correctly, is that we are already looking at some possibilities and alternatives there, and that was why it wasn't in the recommendation.
I think there are a lot of people, and this could say it's the media's fault, you could say we didn't communicate it well, whatever it is, but everybody misunderstood this process from the beginning. Everybody kept talking about decision makers and why the decision makers weren't on that committee. You guys are the decision makers. You've seen the last two, like we were here till 9 o'clock last week, right? If we had come in and talked about all 81 buildings in Hamilton County and didn't have any recommendation in front of you, we would, I mean, that's unrealistic to think that we would get anything done. So we had to have a starting point. These are simply a starting points, and you can clearly see that 2 of the big moves impact Howard, which then helps us address this issue. But you've got to have those 2 big moves, and so it's not worth talking. Worth is not the right word. For us to talk about it, we had to decide, is Brainerd actually something that the board's willing to consider? And does Gateway expand 6th grade seats, 7th grade seats, 8th grade seats downtown?
So, yeah, so I just want to acknowledge that. I think that's a concern. One statement that I heard that I thought was an interesting statement, I can't speak to how accurate it is or not, is that there can be better communication, especially to the Spanish-speaking families at Howard regarding the open enrollment options in future ready institutes, because a lot of families are unaware of what that is and how it works and where we go. That came from a community activist in the room where I was, and I thought it was a really interesting point, and I wanted to capture that. But I would, and I put it here on my list of priorities, as far as all this communication. To me, whatever we do has to solve the overcrowding at Howard. It has to be part of our solution. So I've put that now on 4 priorities. All my priorities, as I add them up, cost about $500 million. But they're getting there. Then we'll prioritize from there. But that's up there for me.
Mrs. Thurman?
Yeah, we've been talking about this at Howard Connect for 2-3 years. So I think that Howard has been in the discussion, just trying to figure out something there. But is that was my question, but you say that is still something we're looking at putting them at Gateway, so that would free up, that would take care of a lot of the overcrowding at Howard.
Yeah, let me be clear. I don't think the recommendation moving them straight to Gateway to me is not a good recommendation.
Okay.
It's not one that I would be willing to bring. But what is there is the opportunity to expand more seats, right? And a career technical pathway. They're doing a lot of career, project-based learning. There is opportunity for more seats to open up, which then would naturally allow kids to choose that option. I think there's opportunities, as Black mentioned, that, and I've heard it from the community, that they don't want to just be made part of Orchard Knob. I think there's a chance at Orchard Knob Middle that if we're willing to think about it differently, that we could do something really unique there, and partner in a way with people that maybe would serve kids better than what we've been doing it. I think that's something that if the board's willing to talk about, down the road we talk about it. But again, when you call it timing, you call it whatever it is, but Howard Connect right now is in space and is not using the space appropriately, and everybody keeps talking about we got to do something for Howard, and I agree we do, but the obvious solution is right there.
Right.
We've just got to decide what to do.
Well, that was the question I was going to ask. I knew you talked about Gateway and then Howard and then Orchard Knob. So they are not a zone magnet.
That's right.
So those kids come from everywhere, so they could go anywhere to school. So it's not a community school.
Correct.
Even though some of the kids in the community go there, it's not a zone community school. So they could technically go anywhere. So in your opinion, is Orchard Knob the best? Is that the best option? I know that was the best
I think
option
that
when we
if
talked
you were
about it
asking
before.
me for my two recommendations, I would say, let's think, how do we do something unique at Orchard Knob? Or how do we open up these other seats and then just do a grade level by grade level close of Howard Connect, meaning like next year or 2 years from now, maybe we don't accept a sixth grade class, and then we don't accept a seventh grade. You see what I'm saying? And then it just flows into the other options naturally as they open. It'll be through school choice. It won't be, what I want to be clear is I'm not saying is that we physically move Howard Connect. I'm saying you open it up by school choice because it is a magnet school, right?
And you're
that-
saying make it a high school instead of a middle? I'm not
Yeah, I'm
understanding.
saying you use that wing then to deal with the overcrowding. You turn that
Okay.
wing into a ninth grade
Okay.
academy
All right.
for Howard, and it solves the overcrowding problem.
And so why not move it to Gateway versus Orchard Knob? You said those were the two options. Why Orchard Knob over Gateway?
Because I think you would be forcing in two programs into Gateway that really it's hard to make sense. Like, why would you do that? Why would you not just make it one program that starts together at sixth grade and then flows from there into, performing arts and into CTE pathways? I mean, I describe it like walking away thinking about this last week. To me, what makes the best sense, you think about college, right? You go your freshman year of college, everybody's kind of in the same gen ed classes, and then you slowly separate into your majors from there. We're beating around the bush about CCA, but I think that we've got an opportunity to again knock several birds out with one stone and moving CCA there. They already actually have majors where you go in sixth grade and you major. Same thing there. You could put a sixth grade class that majors, and one kid could end up on a performing arts pathway, another kid can end up on a computer science pathway. It's the same situation that we've got, and so instead of putting two different programs, you put it under one program and just open up more sixth grade classes, sixth grade seats than what we have right now at CCA.
Mrs. Black.
My concern, I have several concerns with that option. If we're talking about creating something new as far as CTE at the Gateway building that is directed towards meeting the needs of the employers that are on Riverside Drive, and we're talking about Howard Connect having all this really creative project-based learning that could feed into that kind of CTE pathway, I don't understand why it doesn't make sense to move the whole school to Gateway and provide relief for Howard's overcrowding immediately. And also a concern as, a CCA parent and attending the meeting at Gateway, there are a lot of parents that are afraid based on the last 40 years of education, that once you start adding things to a fine arts program, that the fine arts slowly gets defunded and goes away. And considering that CCA is one of the best fine arts magnet schools in the state, and they've been recognized nationally, that this community doesn't want to lose that. And so I don't understand why we couldn't have a more technology-based CTE pathway from 6 to 12 that's based on Howard Connect on one floor and the fine arts school separate on another floor for 6 through 12. I get the idea that combining them at the middle school level might make sense. The fear is that you lose the culture that's at CCA and you lose the arts the art focus at CCA.
I think you've got an opportunity right here, and I'll be the first to say it, is that CCA right now is probably the finest performing arts school in our region, maybe in the entire Southeast. And we have an opportunity right now at a building that is maybe the most prominent location to double down on the arts that will have a generational impact in this county. And we could do that, right? And so I see this as actually a way to invest more long-term in the arts and also serve what we are hearing from the business community. I heard someone the other day say this about the culture and how do you like keep true with the auditioning aspect of CCA. Well, guess what? There are ways that we can show capacity and computer science that we're already doing that could include the audition pathway. The reason you start it, in my opinion, at 6th grade is because of the culture piece. As you say, these kids are coming in together, they're part of the culture, they know that they're gonna major and end up in different ways, but we've got an opportunity that really can make a statement around what we believe in the arts and could make it, in my opinion, programmatically, I think it's already one of the top schools in the Southeast for the arts. We can make the facility match what it's doing and at the same time, again, address the overcrowding at Howard. Well, this is, and again, like, I feel like I'm the bad guy in this conversation, but we're beating around the bush at this. There are 190 kids at Howard Connect.
Right.
Whatever we did at Howard Connect is not attracting enough kids.
Okay. Well, Mr. Connor wants to speak, but I just do want to comment on that. You know, a lot of the curriculum or what we're doing at Howard Connect mirrors CCA curriculum as well. So I think I'm missing something here because I don't understand why.
Because I think you've got to house it under, like.
Are you just saying the Howard Connect name would need to go away? Is that what you're saying? If we did that,
Well,
is that what you're saying?
I think you rebrand the whole thing. I
Sure.
think you.
So CCA's name goes away too.
Yeah, I think you call it Chattanooga High and then have a pathway for the fine arts and a pathway for, what I don't think you call it CTE. I think you come up with a better name. But you've got institutes, again, thinking about it like a university, under one dean, you've got multiple pathways, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what I think that you have at CCA is an established program that we know will be successful, right? And we know that the community is calling for fine arts programming. You see just across the road, the Tivoli Foundation is investing millions and millions and millions of dollars into their fine arts side that has a school connection piece. So there are a lot of things that are building here that I think we've got this opportunity to create, more space for 6th graders. So we do it under a brand that, quite honestly, is probably one of our strongest brands.
Yeah. Well, I get what you're saying. I get the dilemma. I think that the perception issue, and maybe it's beyond perception, maybe it's real, I'm not sure. But my hunch is that the issue that we're also not addressing is that I just don't know how successful it would be to move Howard Connect to Orchard Knob Middle or attempt to move that brand over to Orchard Knob Middle. I don't know if that would be successful either. And I was, very involved in the creation of Howard Connect and the naming of Howard Connect, and
So why don't we?
it would be taking a lot away from the community.
I think we could look at doing something completely different at Orchard, because again, we've got a runway. Like,
Right.
we don't have to make that final decision tonight, but I think there are some things that we've never thought about.
Yeah, and you and I have talked a lot about Orchard Knob Middle and like the opportunities there, even outside of this idea.
Yeah.
And I think that other ideas are better than this one, if I'm just being really frank
Yeah.
with you. I
This
just
isn't my
don't.
number one idea, but I'm afraid to say it publicly.
It's okay. But I think that we need to be really, you're asking us to be really honest. Honestly, it's not going to work to put Howard Connect to Orchard Knob Middle. Like, we need to be
Yeah.
really honest with ourselves about that, and we need to stop tiptoeing around that.
Yeah.
And, I think what Jill is attempting to get at, if it's okay if I just, like, put some words in your mouth, it's that the reality is that, like, to not put Howard Connect at Gateway feels very much like taking something away from the community. And I think, that is no doubt, like, That is the problem here.
I hear you, but
I know,
again,
I know,
what,
I know
like,
you hear me.
we've got to be
I know.
honest about it.
I just think that we need to, I don't know, I mean, I hear you, we gotta make a decision because we have a real problem in front of us, but, this is the hardest one out of the whole list.
So I mean, I think you go back to like core values, right? And when we talk about core values and, you know, when we're trying to create as many high quality seats as possible, if we're gonna rebrand the whole thing, you still are opening up more seats at 6 through 8 with this model, regardless of if it's called Chattanooga High, regardless if it's called CCA or Howard Connect. As long as we're communicating it early, which we've got plenty of time to do it, we're opening up more seats for kids to access. And again, I agree with you. I think if we're open to it, there's some crazy ideas that we could do at Orchard Knob Middle that could be really exciting that the community would see as an investment in that community.
Yeah, I mean, even though I was on this planning committee, I just want y'all to all know, like, I didn't get anything that I wanted in this. Sorry, Tucker's back there too, and I didn't. Like, just to be really frank, y'all think that like that I must have gotten everything I wanted. I got nothing that I wanted in this plan. But one of the things I did really want was like a new plan for Orchard Knob Middle. And, that's not here, but, reimagining Orchard Knob Middle is the next best thing I can hope for. So, and I'll be on the record, I wanted CSAS to get a new school, and far cry from it. So we'll probably never get a new school. But anyways, okay, Mr. Connor has his light on.
Thank you. Yes, actually, Tiffany, last week I mentioned CSAS being the oldest school building in our entire district, 1929. But that's not what I put my light on. I wanted to say a little bit more, like Dr. Robertson is saying, that we need to be thinking not in just linear moves, or not just thinking about one building and one aspect. As he mentioned, we've got a world-class, nationally acclaimed art school that is a driver of a lot of the things in our community and a lot of things in our school system. And it's just an absolute asset and a diamond that I have said on record and will say again that will not move anywhere without a linear move, if not a better move. And that's what they deserve, and that's what they've earned through their test scores, through their service to the community, and through their participation in their majors. Now, that being said, if that's kind of the catalyst and that's the thought, and that's what the board chooses to move there, I warmed to the idea recently when we talked about it in the manner of a college, in the manner of having different majors and deans over different schools. And the reason that there's the pushback to put just this named school into that building and be two separate entities is then you lose the passion and the desire of the school as one whole and working together. We've talked a lot about how at Soddy-Daisy, if you had 3 different schools on one campus, then the other schools that feed in will feel left out. It's kind of a similar thing in my mind here of seeing, well, you get this one little space for your building. So I digress. Coming back to it, Howard Connect does a lot of the things that they do at CCA. They've got a recording studio that's state of the art, wonderful. We're talked so much about decreasing roofs and decreasing resources. If we've got something that they already use and something that can be blended in a new and exciting way for these students, I think that we're standing in their way by hanging on to a name. And I think that if we open up the seats and make it so that we are servicing the people of the area, the people of downtown, the people who have been underserved and forgotten about for so long, that it's only one more good step for our community. I will say that I am beyond excited for the meetings that Mr. Groen mentioned with the mayor's office. I've said before that I really wish we'd had the opportunity to do that before this entire process and get some things on there. So I'm just so happy that it's happening now, that everybody's going to get a chance to have some meetings and get on the same page to make sure that we're showing together how we can grow.
Mr. Perez.
So just a quick comment, and coming back to the Howard School. My concern with everything we've said, I don't have too much concern. As a matter of fact, with Howard Connect, I had the conversation about how hard it is to recruit students sometimes for Harknett, and for me, that doesn't make sense to have to work really hard to try to recruit students. But I will say what I don't want is in this move that we neglect the opportunity to also see how we need to reinvest in the building of the Howard School as we move forward. So when I say it's a priority, I don't just mean, oh good, it's not as overcrowded as it was before. It's none of, that was a statement made. Nobody should hear about a teacher fainting because it's hot in her room. That has to be fixed. And so I just want to encourage us to say, what else, as we're doing this move, can we do to reinvest in the Howard School?
If it's okay, real quick, Jill, I just wanted to piggyback on that. I meant to bring that up earlier. So the capital needs that we have at Howard, aside from the overcrowding issues, like to me, there's two problems, right? You've got these capital items. Do we think that those capital items are expensive enough to really include in this plan, or could that just be part of our budget?
I think remember the 6 million that was pulled out of our budget that will be part of this bond for deferred maintenance. I think it falls in that, or I think the HVAC is one that possibly you consider here. I mean, that's going to be like on the scale of Brainerd and CCA in terms of those of you who've been on the board for a while. Those were $8 to $12 million projects.
Yeah, I would just encourage us to think about about this school as two separate needs, and really you can very much, I think, address the big capital needs pretty quickly, but the other issue is a little bit more complex. So, okay, Mrs. Black.
You can't get a brand new auxiliary gym from deferred maintenance money. That would be a separate cap as part of the capital.
Because you would need to move or have more space in order to do that.
If you're putting an auxiliary gym, you've got two options. There's an old gym there that some people think can be renovated. I'm not convinced.
I do not think so.
And so, there is at Howard Connect a small, it's like a full-size floor, but doesn't have stands, so it adds some practice space. Not great. And so if you want to put an auxiliary gym, you either clear out some space across from the parking lot and put an auxiliary gym there, or go across the street by the old church and the interstate and put it there. But there are other things that need to happen at Howard. We put some money into the softball field there a couple years ago, if you remember, built that. And we put space there to put concessions and restrooms. They don't have restrooms and concessions, and I think we've got plans for lights. I'm looking back at Tucker. I think that's part of what's coming. So we've got some stuff that, besides the auxiliary gym, that needs to take place. That is not just saying, well, if we fix the crowding, doesn't mean we don't have other things that need to happen.
Okay. Mrs. Black.
Right. I was following y'all's conversation, and now I can't remember what I was going to say. Mainly that the deferred maintenance needs at Howard and the auxiliary gym and the new installation around athletic facilities and would be two separate that would be two separate pots of money. We wouldn't be able to get all of, the money that was needed for a new auxiliary gym from the deferred maintenance fund. We would have to dip in two different places to meet all of the needs of the Howard School, is my point. But also, yeah,
we're saying the same things. Auxiliary gym and the concession, whatever, over by the softball and baseball. To me, that would go into bond issue.
Right.
Some other things, depending on the HVAC, how big of the dollar. If it's $5 million deferred maintenance, if it's $8 million, then it goes in this.
Right.
So we're saying
Okay.
the same thing.
Okay. But I'm sorry, you're right. I didn't mention previously the need for lights at the softball field and baseball field, and a need for restrooms over there. Because right now Howard is missing a big opportunity in their athletics program to raise money to support their athletics program by hosting tournaments, and they can't host tournaments because they don't have the proper restroom facilities for a baseball tournament. They're using the restrooms that are in the old gym that are not
Or the stadium.
great.
They're-
And not I think the lights are the biggest issue. They're missing out on $3,000, $4,000 a year toward that feeds back into their programming by not being able to host tournaments. And I mean, we all live here. We're a tourism city. They're right there in downtown, next to. It would be a very attractive place to host sports tournaments if they had the facilities to do it, and it would support the athletics program at Howard if we made those investments.
We need a gym at Hickson too, just throw that in there. We can't host tournaments up there either. And,
Well, I need a couple new schools, so. All right. I don't have any more lights. Is there anyone that wants to speak on this topic?
So
Yes.
I know there's a lot going on here, but just to be clear, this point, like, this issue is going to filter into a couple of different scenarios with, recommendation at Brainerd, with a recommendation but I'll probably pull separately and put it all together to show how it addresses. Does that make sense?
So you think you're gonna show us recommendations for, Brainerd, Howard, and Orchard Dom?
Well,
Or-
in those narratives, we'll put in how it impacts Howard, but then put something specific together for Howard into one narrative showing how we're going to deal with it. Orchard Knob, I need to have some conversations about what we can do there.
Okay. All right, our final topic is Thrasher Elementary expansion for growth. Mr. Perez,
That's also a priority.
of course it is.
So Thrasher, as I anticipated, the community came by mostly to hear what was being asked, what the conversation was around it. As everyone's mentioned regarding many of our communities, Signal Mountain, Walden are growing communities. Thrasher is an excellent school, continuously awarded for its excellence, so it draws a large number of new families that want students to be there or at Nolan, and our capacity has reached its limits. Not only that, but also our original building is very old. I don't have the age of that building, but and so what the community asked, a couple things that I think are important to put on the table. One, really a question is, when, again, I put it to two things. What is mega and what is a priority? And so Thrasher already is at about 620 students. And so if we grow and expand, we're already getting into that definition of mega, and the community keeps growing. And so are we only basically putting a Band-Aid to that growth? While a suggestion that came up was, can we explore a new elementary school somewhere else on the mountain that would allow growth and alleviation of that problem? I want to put in there, this is me speaking, but as Thrasher grows, as the success of Thrasher and Nolan grow, and as the success of Signal Mountain Middle and High School grows, the demand on that school as well continues to increase, and the need for planning 50 years down the road, to me, also shows evidence of what we're going to have to do there. That includes a topic that I actually hope I have an answer on before I step away from this board, which is the fact that the road to Nolan and Signal Mountain is insufficient, was never built for a road to handle the amount of movement that happens today. that is not a road, no, not too different from Soddy-Daisy High School as well, where if there's an emergency, and we need vehicles to be able to access that road quickly, it's not a road that would allow, for that kind of access. So all that to say, I would say that expanding Thrasher is a great option. Exploring other possibilities would be an interesting discussion, but not at, I would not put that at the cost of like expanding Thrasher. I want us to look at the future immediately and the demand on our schools. But really, because Signal Mountain, again, I think Soddy-Daisy is a similar kind of community. We're such a, like, it's a unit, right? This is the unit where people go to elementary school and middle school and high school. The demand on that community with the growth, I think in part and very substantially due to the excellent results of the schools there. Not to diminish the excellent results at other schools, but people are drawn to that community, is beginning to show signs of how it stretches us beyond capacity. So there's a lot that I think needs to be addressed, and expanding Thrasher is one part of that discussion of the needs, whether it comes from another fund. You know, I got an email from a parent asking me again what's happening with that road, and my answer is we have $2 million of maintenance funds, and 73. I thought we were 79, so I don't know where I lost count. But
School numbers.
73 schools that have demands, and so suddenly a lot of work that we did. Thank you to Deputy Mayor McClendon over there. A lot of work that has been done. A lot of that is on hold because we don't have the capacity to do it. So anyway, so for me, it's all of that. I mean, the community's on board, wants to know what the best solution is and how we move forward. So I want to make sure that I do, out of respect for my community, call that a priority on my priority list as well. So.
Okay, any comments? I don't think anybody cares about Thrasher.
We passed.
Just kidding. Do you have comments on?
I mean, what I would say is that the capacity issues on the mountain are at the elementary level. So we added to Nolan, I think, I want to say 2015, 16, 17, somewhere in there, and it's already right at capacity. Thrasher's over capacity. We just had to put a portable on the kids' basketball court this year. And so they're over capacity. So an addition there is needed. I think to the long term, like, conversation, you're gonna have to put an addition at Thrasher no matter what, you know. And so I think it's not throwing a question of, are you throwing good money at something that's not gonna be good in the long. No, I think you're gonna need an addition there regardless. So I think it makes sense. The high school, it's under capacity, but it's also built in a way that 15 years down the road, if we see a huge surge, it's built to where there's already a place to put an addition, and it was planned that way. So we should be good there. I think the bigger question is on the road issue, do we try to include that in this option? To go in the money that's bonded out that road, you know, probably you're talking about $1.5 million, something like that. It was in the original plans to have a second entrance, and for whatever reason got left out, like a lot of things do.
Is that in the city? That's in the city of Signal Mountain, isn't it?
It is, but
any of that their property?
I like to refer to it as the road that belongs to everybody, and therefore the road that belongs to nobody.
So it's part of that park. Remember, Miss Thurman?
Oh, I
there
remember.
was
That's what I can't
yeah.
remember the situation. I remember the discussion, but
It's a question of, does the Parks and Rec own it?
Right.
Does the state own it because they're state forest? Do we own it? Town of Signal Mountain? But either way, I think everybody is in agreement that something's got to be done. So
Okay,
think
I just didn't know
trying to
who would,
pull
if it would
resources
share
together to do it.
responsibility for the, maybe everybody pool their money in together, maybe everybody could
Yeah.
get it done, okay.
I was speaking of what you were just saying about like you're gonna have to add God, it's 8 o'clock at night on a Monday. Why are we here? I'm so tired. Add an expansion, whatever that word is I'm looking for. What is the growth rate on Signal? That's what I'm looking for. Like, Ben, do you have numbers of like permits pulled and how many homes are being added on Signal? Anecdotally, it feels like it's exploding and has exploded over the last like 3 or 4 years. So I was just curious. So like, yeah, I mean, it seems like you're either going to have to do this or like just build a whole new school.
I mean, I think there's potential that 10 years down the road that you might have to look at another elementary. This is, I'd say back in the day. Back in the day, there were 3 elementary schools on Signal. There were 2 that were K-3s, and then there was one that was a 4th and 5th grade. Thrasher was actually a 4th and 5th grade, and then everybody went to the middle school. So you might have to look at something like that. Again, the problem is land.
Yeah,
The-
landlocked, yeah.
The 3 schools that we had, the middle school we sold, the town now owns both Bachman and Old Signal Mountain Elementary, and so like trying to find the property to do it is gonna be
There
challenging.
used to be Mountain Oaks up there too, wasn't it? Mountain Oaks, it used to have
Yeah.
a school up there right up Roberts Mill.
I mean, does it make sense to also like put as part of this plan to start looking for land? Okay.
Probably.
I mean, that's probably some of the proactive work we should be doing. Okay. Mrs. Black and then Mr. Connor.
I kind of had similar questions for Ben. If we look at the standard that we've been talking about through this whole process for elementary schools being like that sweet spot between around 750 kids, that would add 200. If we use that standard at Thrasher, that would add 200 seats. Is that something that's going to, like, how long is that going to accommodate the growth in Signal Mountain? That's my question.
I mean, I think it's hard to predict, but I mean, I think it's, again, to the point, even if it's only provides room for 5 years, you're gonna have to do it either way. And so to Ms. Robinson's point, I think looking for 10-year solution of like what is potential property, that's probably something that we need to be charged with.
Mr. Connor.
My question is just a couple quick map questions. So at Thrasher, we're talking about putting it in this back area by the playground.
You've got that area, you're talking about the area that's down, it's down a significant hill. I don't know if the map you're showing shows how steep that hill is. It's probably 40 feet below the current building. I think there's a place where the basketball court is, you could possibly do there, or we even have talked about maybe the front, because the front of the building needs a little bit of a facelift, is to figure out a way to do it on the front and then fix the traffic around the back.
Okay. And then looking at the high school, it looks like there is just woods for days. And
Bunch of state park, there's a bunch of, we went into an agreement to get some money to develop that.
camp back there, too.
There's a church camp back there. I mean, back, when that school was built, there was nothing back there,
Yeah.
except for the church camp.
and okay, just logistically, where was the planned the second entrance? Was it still on Shackleford Ridge Road, or was it over here
I
on
think
Edwards
there were-
Point?
There were 2, but the one that the most recent one comes off Shackleford Ridge and then connects down around, I think is it around the back of the softball field?
There's a road to nowhere over there right now, but
No, not off. You're talking about the one that goes off into the softball field.
So we looked,
behind the softball field.
we looked at 3 different possibilities, according to the fire marshals and different engineers that look at it. One of the possibilities is just expanding the current road to allow at least a 3rd lane for an emergency. That's, it would be wonderful to have a second
There are a
entrance.
couple of pull-offs that go into like state park trails.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
I've been up there a few times. I just didn't know what we owned and how because there's like a random house here, and so okay. But it just looks like there's woods for days and days and
yeah,
days.
there are.
Okay, any other comments? Great. Any closing thoughts on
So
this or
what-
next steps?
What our plan is to take everything from last meeting and this meeting, compile it kind of like we did similar to here of final recommendations. Try to get it to you before the December meeting, but it would allow us time to discuss it at the December meeting. Make any final adjustments, but again, I think the goal is in January to have a vote on priority order of projects.
So, do you envision us having a work session
I
at the
think
January
we
meeting
probably will need
on
to
this
ha-
topic?
Yeah, between December and January meeting, I'm sure everybody will want to.
Like, would our 4:30 session be a work session on this topic?
December, yes, planning on having
Yeah,
final
go through all of it.
recommendations, present them. Would you discuss? I thought you were asking, would we have another one of these meetings in between?
So that's like next week, right?
It's the 14th, I believe, is that
So the 14th, okay.
December 25th, I think we're all.
Yeah, I think we're having a public meeting at Marco's house, right? Jill?
I have a question. And I don't know who makes this decision. I don't know if this is Mrs. Jones' decision about how we put this plan together. Are we going to be voting on each individual piece? Because I don't want, like, if we have 8 recommendations in one big plan, I don't want to sink an entire plan because we can't decide what to do in Soddy-Daisy. Excuse me. Sorry.
I mean, I think that's pleasure of the board to decide how you vote on it. I think what we're called to take to or you're charged with taking to the county commission is a list of projects. And so we're going to have to be able to put a list of projects together.
It seems like the highest probability where the community feels represented is for each recommendation to be voted on and then put together.
I would second that.
I don't think we have to make that decision tonight. I mean, I think, we can talk about that. You're, again, not asking anybody to vote till January. We could talk about it the 14th.
Yeah, I just wanted to raise that question and have us all be thinking about it. Because, like I said, I don't want to sink an entire plan because we can't decide on one item.
That's going to be the tough part. I just would say that all of us, collectively need to hopefully be able to look at this through the big picture instead of me, give me mine. This is what's important to my constituents. At some point, we're going to have to do that. Look at the big picture. What's the best for Hamilton County? And what's best for Hamilton County, my priority may not get in there. And that's going to be hard. It's going to be hard.
I'll say something Mr. Connor said to me about 3 months ago when we started this conversation. I kind of laughed at him when he said it. He jokingly, when I first mentioned this, he said, "You realize this is how superintendents get fired." And now,
It's
three
not a joke.
three months into the process, I realize he may not have been joking with me.
Thank you for having the political courage.
I'd like to say something real quick, please. Justin, I think you also remember a couple of years ago I said I'd be more nervous about getting the job than not getting it.
It was like 2 seconds after stepping into your car at 7:30.
We call them like we see them.
Thank you very much. None of this is easy. I appreciate it.
Okay, I think our meeting's adjourned. Thank you.